Greetings all. Welcome to our second session of building an end-to-end browser-based application. I'm Liz Wilson, Education Specialist and Digital Producer here at Synergex, and I'm joined by Johnson Luong, one of our software engineers and today's presenter. Johnson is also the brains behind the xfBBQ app that is being built over the course of these 4 webinars. And you may already know Jeff Green and Steve Ives. They will be available during the Q&A portion in case anyone has questions regarding Harmony Core. So before I hand the floor over to Johnson, just a couple of things to note about today's webinar. The session is being recorded and will be live on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. That said, if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you will be notified as soon as the video is live. So there's my pitch for that. I'm just going to copy a link to our channel in this chat area here. We will be answering your questions at the end, but you can always use the questions area or the chat panel to post a question whenever it pops into your head. So during that Q&A portion, we will also give you the ability to unmute yourself so that you can ask your question out loud. So those were my housekeeping items. And that is all set for me. So Johnson, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Hey, hello, everyone. So this is part 2 of the xfBBQ webinar series. Let's get started. On today's agenda, I'm going to cover previously on xfBBQ, how to create a barbecue, how to do key file generation, creating a user, browser debugging, or rather how to do browser debugging. We're going to cover logging in and out of xfBBQ, and then lastly, a crash course in Redux. So if this is your first time viewing or you guys need a recap of what happened last time, this is what we ended up with, a very basic interface. You could see that OData is being presented to us from the front end. And we're going to extend this now by adding user login and state. So let's go ahead and get started. Inside Harmony Core, the solution for Harmony Core, I'm going to stop the server. We're going to generate some more files now. So inside regen.bat, I'm going to enable a couple more things. So alternate keys, count, select, filter, order by, relations, put, post, batch, and delete. Oh, and just as something that I remember now from the last session, the 4.4 page wasn't working for whatever reason. But it turns out all I had to do was absolutely nothing to get it working again. So I think that was just a sacrifice I had to make to the demo gods. So who knows what it was. So going back here, so I enabled things, and then I'm going to regen the files. So save, open up the command prompt, then regen. Okay, and then I'm going to rebuild now and start the server. Okay, now let's check out all the things that we have added with Postman. So you guys recall from last time in Postman, we were just simply reading the information coming in. But now that we have enabled all these other options, we should be able to do other things with our data as well, such as add new data in. So let's go ahead and import the new Postman file that's been generated for us. I'm going to replace the existing one. Let's go ahead and read the barbecues. It works the exact same way. Nothing has changed in this area. You guys have noticed that some options are missing from here, such as the ability to delete, even though I have added it to here. You can see that delete does exist in other areas, such as favorites. And the reason for that is inside the repository. I just open that up really quick. Inside some of these structures, I have edited the long description with no delete endpoint, which means that the delete endpoint won't be generated. And other ones, for example, inside order, there's no post endpoint. And the reason for that is that we're going to make our own custom version of that. And I will show how to do that later. Okay, so going back into Postman, let's try making a new barbecue now. So I'm going to edit the body. No ID should be generated because these are new barbecues. And oh, wait. Ooh, I ran into an error. So it turns out what you need to do in order to have this all work is that you need to make your own little your own primary key generator. So that's what we have to do now. So I'm going to stop the server. And then I'm going to create a couple of new files inside services here. First one's going to be called the primary key generator. And then there's one more that I need to add. It's called startup.custom. Okay, now I'm going to paste in code for these. So inside the primary key generator, what it is going to do is it's going to read in data from the sysframs file that I have. And what it's going to do is that it's going to look for the number in there and it's going to increment it by 1. And then that's going to be the new primary key. And then inside startup.custom, it's code to simply just add it. Okay, and I start the server again. Now, if I try to make a new barbecue, it's going to add a new barbecue in here, number 5. Then I make more, number 6, number 7, 8, 9, and you get the picture. And then if I read all the barbecues again, they should all be added to here now. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new user form. And in order to do that, I need to add a UserController.Custom.dbl. I'll stop the server again. And now inside services.controllers, I'm going to add a new file. UsersController.Custom.dbl. Okay. And so what this is going to do is essentially a more custom way to host a new user. We're going to grab the primary key as usual. But here there's something new. The join date is going to be automatically added by the server. So then I start up the host again. Okay. And then let's look at all the users. And I'm going to add a new user. I'm just going to take advantage of what I have currently. I'm going to change this a little bit to users. Inside the body, some things need to change. So for example, let's just simply add a name. Okay, and so see the join date is automatically added to there with right now is UTC time. Then we go to view users. See the new user does exist with the new join date as well. So that's all fine and dandy, but let's do this from the front end instead. So inside our Visual Studio Code, I'm going to add a couple of new files here. But first I need to edit the user API so that I can have a post users as well. Or rather, I'm going to call it save user. And then I need to change this base URL here so it doesn't have the trailing slash. I'm going to add it to here. And we need to add a new user registration form. Or to do that, I need to stop the service and add a couple of more npm packages. npm I final form. So final form is a package that will add forms to our React front end. There are two parts to it. There's final form, and then there's React final form. I'm going to add bcrypt.js, which is going to hash our passwords for us. As far as I know, bcrypt is the pretty standard password hashes used. Moment is a JavaScript library that will do some time management things for us. And lastly, React Toastify is just a little thing to add toast notifications to the app. Okay. And then here inside user, I need to add a new file for the registration form. UserRegistrationForm.jsx. I'm going to paste in code for that. And then we also need to update our app and index to account for this new page. Okay, and then the same thing in the header. Okay, save all of that. Okay, so I'm going to start the server now. I have a browser open here, so I'm going to refresh it. Okay, now we have a user registration form here. So if I try to go ahead and add a user, so let's call him Johnson. I'm going to submit. It doesn't work. I wonder why it doesn't work. Oh yeah, well that's because the rest of the code is left as an exercise to the reader. So let's go ahead and figure out how to make that work. I'm going to open up the console by hitting F12. Going to change it so it's a window. Let's go ahead and debug inside here and figure out what's up. So inside React, I can open up code because it is all mapped in correctly for us. So I source components, user registration form. You can see that the code is the exact same thing as in here. So I make a breakpoint over here. Let's try submitting again. You can see the breakpoint is hit. We could check the values that we have added in there. You can see I've added email, the password is in here as well. And then the password does get hashed by bcrypt, which means what we're going to save in our server looks something like this instead of the plain text password. And you can see that as well inside Postman, how all the passwords are hashed. None of them are in plain text. So with this information, let's go ahead and figure out how to add a new user. So inside here, I'm going to import star from user API, as user API from. And as you can see, Visual Studio Code has very good IntelliSense here, which makes it very easy to write code for. And then inside of user API, I'm going to await because it is asynchronous. User API.save user. Inside save user, I'm going to make a new object. So we could see that we have values in here that needs to be saved, email name, password, or rather just the email name and the type field being this right here, the administrator or just a regular user. So that's the information I'm going to save here. I use that name. Email, the type, and lastly the hash. So I'm going to save that. You won't see it right away because the debugger is paused. So I'm going to let it keep going. It's going to refresh. Let's enter information again. Johnson at email, password, and the account type. Let's hit submit again. So now, as you can see, everything has updated on this debugger as well. So I'm going to remove the breakpoint, let the code continue. And then let's double check to see if the user has been added or not. So go back to user, see that I have been added now. As you can see, the password is hashed. But this is not a very good user experience because we have to jump back and forth. So let's change that a little bit. I'm going to import toast from our Toastify. For order to use React Toastify, I need to change some things in app.jsx. So I need to import the toast container in React Toastify here. Oops. Okay, and then I'm going to import the CSS for it as well. And then I'm going to add the toast container down here. And then back inside here, I'm going to add a new toast. So toast.success. Add a new user. So now we know that there's a new user that's going to be added. And then I'm going to do history.push. User. Which means that after a user is added, we're going to be pushed straight to the user table right here so that we're not stuck in the form. So let's try that. I'm adding our new user. Call him John S. Submit. And as you can see, we have a toast notification and we're automatically getting pushed to the user table here. And if I refresh this, new user has been added right here, John S. Oops. Okay. So with a user registration form, what we need is also login. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. New file. User login. I'm going to paste in code for that. And this is just another form that will take in information from the user. So we're going to have a name and a password here, and then we're going to check it against what we have in the server using bcrypt.compare. And what that'll do, it will tell us whether the hash of the password matches. So if it doesn't match, then we're going to have a success else. We're going to toast.error, wrong user or password. In order to do that, I need to add something new to the user API called getUserByName so that I could look at the name instead of just grabbing all the information. Let's go back inside user API and add that. So this is simply going to do a filter. Name equals username here. I need to update the switches. As well inside the header. Save all that. Now what we have here is a user login form. So let's just try what I have, Johnson. Going to submit, and I am logged in now. And if I try something like, for example, an incorrect password, that's not going to work. Wrong username or password. Then we can double check that in the user table here. We have a last login date that I log here. So I could see that, for example, John S has never logged in, but I have logged in just recently. Okay, so I'm going to save all this now inside Git. All these changes. Added user creation. And as a reminder, all this code can be viewed inside GitHub. It's github.com, the Plasma Storm /xfBBQ demo. Oh, I need to do a git push. Git push. Okay, now it will show up here. Refresh. See, last committed 44 seconds ago. So feel free to look inside this code and as well inside the Synergex GitHub xfBBQ. There is the whole thing that I'm going to demonstrate and show how to make at the end of these 4 sessions. So go ahead and check that out if you guys want to. Okay, so now that we have all this login stuff done, it's not very useful because I'm already logged in, but the app doesn't understand that because I haven't added that functionality to there. So let's go ahead and do that next. I'm going to stop the React server. I'm going to install Redux now, which will handle state for us. I'm just going to paste in a bunch of npm packages in a row. I'll explain what they all are afterwards. So what is Redux? Well, Redux will handle state management for us. So for example, if one of our components down here needs to change something, for example, login, it will need to propagate that change to every other component. Whereas with Redux, what's going to happen is it's going to propagate that into a store, and then the store will update all the individual components. You don't need Redux to develop a complex React app, but kind of like you only need one leg to live. Life is a lot easier with two, or in this case, life is a lot easier with Redux. So how does Redux manage state? You do something to change state. For example, we're going to deposit $10, or rather withdraw $10. Your action will call a dispatch function. So our withdraw action is going to go to the dispatcher. The dispatch function will send the action function and the previous state to the reducer, so the reducer will know how to change the state. And then lastly, the reducer changes the state here. State just gets passed back to the GUI after that. So let's go ahead and add Redux. I have added a lot of packages here, so I'm just going to briefly explain what they all are. So Redux and React Redux are the standard Redux packages that we're going to use. React Redux is simply the React flavor of Redux. React and Redux are not like joined at the hip or anything. You could use Redux independently of React. React's persist is going to allow us to keep state around. So for example, if I were to refresh this app, it would keep the state that I'm logged in. What Redux Thunk does is allow asynchronous logic flow in here, which means that we won't have to wait around for actions to complete. And lastly, Redux Immutable State Invariant will guarantee that state is not mutated. It is very important that inside Redux that the store is always the state of truth. If anything were to ever change unexpectedly in the store, then all these components will update as well. And using this package, Redux Immutable State Invariant, it will double check and error out for us whenever we change state by mutating it directly rather than essentially adding a new copy of the state. So I'm going to explain what all this means in detail. So in order for Redux to work, there is a bit of scaffolding that I have to add in here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. I'm going to add a Redux folder. And then inside the Redux folder, I'm going to add an actions folder and a reducers folder. And then inside Chrome, I'm going to add a new extension. I'm going to add the Redux DevTools at the Chrome. Okay, so inside actions here, I'm going to add a new file, action types.js. I'm going to paste in code for that. Action types will simply list all the action types for us. It is essentially a way to not use magic strings everywhere. So instead of just always using the string, I'm going to call user login success instead. Add a new one. API status actions. Yes. So this will be our begin and error calls. And then as you can see from action types, I'm going to return the type here rather than use magic strings. I'm adding the login action. Inside the login action, there are two functions in here. We're going to dispatch the begin API call, and then we're going to dispatch the login or logout user. And then the login user, we're going to dispatch the user that has been, or is rather trying to log in here. Then inside reducers, you need to add our initial state here. Our initial state is very simple. There's just a blank login object. There's a login reducer. Inside the login reducer, there is a switch of the type. We have two types here. We have a login user and we have a logout user. When the user is logging in, I'm going to return the login action. And then when the user is logging out, I'm just going to return an empty object. There also needs to be a root reducer. Which all it simply does is combine all our reducers together. We only have one reducer for now, but later on in the webinar series, I'm going to add a couple more. And lastly, I need to configure the store. So inside the Redux folder, I'm going to add a configure store.js. And in here is simply a bunch of code that will explain to Redux how state works. So first we have our persistent configuration, which will explain to Redux persist how our storage is set. So key root, I'm going to store everything. I'm going to whitelist the login, which means it's going to store the login information. Here is just simply adding support for Redux DevTools. And then down here, I'm going to apply the middleware to add our immutable state invariant npm package I talked about earlier. I need to update index.jsx to make it known that Redux does exist now. So all I've added is a provider and a persist gate, of which these two things are being imported from the configure store that I just added. So let's try npm start to make sure all this works. We have a browser window open and do an F5 here. Check DevTools. I need to reopen it again as well. We have Redux DevTools now, and as you can see, there's now a persist. There's an init here, and then if I were to log in, you would see that nothing has changed because I have not edited the user login form to account for Redux either. So let's go ahead and change that. So inside user login, I need to use dispatch. So I'm using dispatch that's coming in from React Redux. And now it's simply just using the dispatch call when I'm logging in. Save that. Can't resolve login actions. Oh, I named this file incorrectly. Okay. So I'm going to log in now. Okay, and inside Dev Tools, we have a user login success. And then we check the state. See that inside here, I have a name and a type that I have stored. And then as Jeff alluded to in the last session, it does have essentially a time machine in here. So I could roll back all the state, and then I could do traces of how the state got to where it was as well. So I have logged in user success, and it will go to where that is as well. Okay, so we have logged in. Now we need to be able to log out. So I'm going to add a new page called UserLogout.jsx. So inside, I'm just going to dispatch logout, and I'm going to push them back to the home page, and I'm going to display a test notification. And then if you guys haven't caught on yet, for every page I add, I also need to update the switch and the header page. Okay. Go back inside here. There's a new user logout page. There's nothing here. What? Oh, I just didn't save it. So now inside our Redux Dev Tools, there's now logout user success, which will essentially empty out the login from state. So if I try login again, there's a login user success that will add the state back in, and then I can log out. And then there's another state change to remove the login. But all this is really nice and all, but we're still able to access all this data on the front end without having to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Now that we have all the state information, we could take advantage of it inside our app. So I'm going to update the header. So now instead, I'm going to grab state.login, which is this object right here. And I'm going to change what you see based on the type of user that is logged in, or if the user is logged in at all. And the same thing in the app. So instead of just being able to navigate everywhere, I've now gated being able to navigate around how the user is logged in. So only a specific user type can see specific forms. So now there's nothing here. If I try to navigate to a page that did used to exist, you won't see it exist anymore because now the switch will not route you there. So if I go to any of these other pages, it's not going to show anymore. I need to log in in order for it to show. Whoops. So now I see all my information again. And as you can see, there's only user login or logout. There's no point in logging out when you're already logged out, just as there's no point in logging in when you're already logged in. And when you log out, then the only thing you can see is a user registration form. You can't go back to any of your other previous pages because the app will not route you there anymore. And that is pretty much what Redux is in a nutshell. It essentially allows me to do all this state. So let's recap what we did today. I have modified regen.bat with all this information, and I've regenerated files. I've added a key file generator, added a new user form, and then I also added the login and logout. And then I have demonstrated a crash course in Redux. So in next week's session, I'm going to ask you guys what's wrong with the user registration form. So I noticed that it is pretty bare bones right now, and there's no styling or anything, but there is something else that's wrong with it. I'm going to cover what that is next week. I'm going to be covering how to order your favorite items, as well as how to do batch processing. We're also going to cover other CRUD, create, update, read, or create, read, update, and delete actions for the barbecues and our orders. So stay tuned for next week.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone, give everyone the ability to unmute themselves so they can ask questions. And we already have a question from Kevin Turner. Earlier in your presentation, you created a primary key generator method. Why wouldn't you just use the built-in, okay, I'm going to have to spell this one out, built-in autosequence type for that field? I can repeat the question.
Yeah, or would Jeff know something for this?
I don't. I'm not sure what AUTSQL means.
Oh, got it. Hold on, it was a typo. Autosec.
Autosequence keys. Yeah.
Autosequence.
The is good. The question is, Synergy, as of version 10, has the ability to design an ISAM file with primary keys that are automatically numeric, basically a numeric sequence, and have those keys or those key values automatically assigned. You absolutely could build a solution around that. It's not typical. Most of our customers have ISAM files where a key value is either provided by an application or is generated based on a sequence, and that's primarily for historic reasons. So we've based the sample environment in Harmony Core around that very typical scenario, but you absolutely could make use of auto sequence keys if you're using them in your files.
There is a little bit more to it than that, Steve. So one of the problems with auto sequence keys when you're trying to do transactional processing is that you don't know that key until after the record is stored on disk. And so if you have more than one item that's being stored in a transaction rather than just a single record, and you need to cross-reference the key from the thing you're storing into some other thing that you're storing, you won't know it until after storage. So it can't be done in a single phase worth of commit. You'd have to do multiple operations and be prepared to do more significant rollbacks than are desirable.
That was a great question.
I'm going to apologize really quickly because I forgot to commit my changes that I made for Redux. So I'm going to do that right now. If there's any more questions, go ahead and ask them.
Nothing yet in the questions panel. And I don't see anyone with their hand raised as of right now.
Just as a reminder, next week's session is going to be on Wednesday instead of Thursday, but it's going to be at the same time.
Oh, we do have a question from Anne-Marie. Can you explain the date format?
The date format that I have for the well, I guess it's all the same thing. So inside here, all the date formats that I have in my app are the same, but they're essentially all UTC dates, which means that they're all going to be stored as a single giant number. So if I were to take this and I opened up the C# interactive view, they're all stored in this giant number format. And that is pretty much universal amongst all computers, I would say. There is a way to essentially change this back into normal date and time. So if I were to remove this from here.
What I was wondering is if you're able to tell. So yeah, that works. Perfect. So there is a...
I think the explanation here is that this is a Unix time, or it's called the Unix epoch time, or the POSIX time, or the Unix time. It's basically a number of milliseconds since the 1st of January 1970. So you can do the math and create the actual date and time based on that. And it's very commonly used in web type applications.
And it's not milliseconds, but seconds since.
Seconds. Okay, sorry, yes. Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, sounds like someone's mic is turned on, but I guess I'll go ahead and start wrapping things up for now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Our next session of building an end-to-end browser-based application, again, is scheduled for next Wednesday. That's July 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific, so be sure to sign up for that if you're not already. I'm going to go ahead and post the registration link in the chat area. Before you exit the webinar, you'll be asked to fill out a survey. The survey is not mandatory, but we really do appreciate the feedback that you provide. And you will also be receiving a recording of the session. We would encourage you to forward the recording or the YouTube link once it's published to coworkers involved in web development, as this series speaks directly to their work. And with that, looks like we don't have any more questions. So hopefully we will see you all next time. Thank you so much for joining.